How powerful is the concept of learning, unlearning, and relearning? But also, what makes it so relevant for our work, for our lives, and personal lives, maybe, because work is a big part of our lives today? Why is it so relevant today? But also, what can you do? I get so many questions. We get so many questions about learning, unlearning, and relearning, and its relevance, but also how it applies to organizations and those of us who are growing and trying to build something. And so today's episode, my beautiful unlearner, is going to help you really answer those questions. It's going to help you understand exactly how, as a business owner, as a business leader, but also someone who is looking to be transformative in how you do life, it's going to help you understand exactly what to do that. And this episode is taken from a beautiful conversation that I had as part of the Stellenbosch Business Institute's Leadershift series. Really, really interesting stuff. And I was their thought leader guest for a particular month and had a great conversation with Faith Mangope there. And we titled it The Power of Learning, Unlearning, and Relearning. So I'd like you to use it to share with your team. I'd like you to use it to share with family and friends who are thinking about just being different, showing up differently, because they've noticed that life seems to just always be this spiral, and it feels like you're on a hamster wheel that never stops because everything is the same, but they want to change, and they've gotten to a place where they know that things need to be different. This is the episode to listen to, because it will leave you with practical tips, but also a beautiful, deep understanding of the relevance of learning and unlearning in today's business, organization, and personal climate as well. So I also want to invite you, as we go into the episode, to also reach out to us at the Unlearners. We do a lot of great work with organizations that are, we're talking really great organizations that do fantastic work, but haven't rested on their laurels, because they understand that having done things the same way doesn't mean that we can continue to do them for the next 20, 30, or 50 years. So if your organization is also reimagining what it means to be in their industry, but also serving their customers and clients, then you need to have a conversation with us, because it's time to unlearn. And the truth is that it's always time to unlearn. And when your team can have the capacity and the skill set, and I call it the meta skill, learning and unlearning is the meta skill, because it's the mother of all skills. If we can change and do transformation really well, then we're in a great position to show up in the future. So contact us. We've got really great interventions that range from anything from facilitating strategy conversations, supporting around culture. If you want to build a culture of learning, unlearning, and relearning, there's neuro coaching. A team of certified neuro coaches can provide to you, and a whole lot of other things in between. You might know me from a keynote. That's probably one of the more front end things that we do that you might have seen, a keynote presentation, just to get everyone excited about unlearning and encourage everyone to do it, because most people don't know the concept of unlearning. And so today's podcast episode will help you get all of the answers that you need in order to kickstart your company's unlearning journey. So my unlearner, enjoy this episode. Like I said before, it's titled The Power of Learning, Unlearning, and Relearning, and was part of SBI's Leadership series, and I was the thought leader guest for this particular month. Enjoy the episode, and feel free to contact us should you need any kind of support. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow.
Welcome to it. It is another edition of the Stellenbosch Business Institute Leadershift series. 45 high-impact conversations with some of our global leaders and thought leaders, really on the dynamics of how to navigate the uncertainty that is involved in a forever changing environment of work, of leadership, of politics, of your organization, and the like. My name, of course, is Faith Mangope, and every month it is an absolute honor and a privilege of mine to be bringing you these conversations that matter, these conversations that hopefully make us better people, better prepared leaders that are able to lead with intentionality. And I'm hoping that through this particular conversation this afternoon or morning, or depending on where you're joining us from the world, you are able to just find a little bit of solace knowing that you are not alone in this journey of leadership. Now, just to tell a little bit more about the Stellenbosch Business Institute, of course, we see ourselves as a catalyst for change and to design custom executive learning programs that enhance the way that leaders think, the ways that leaders shift, as well as to adapt to future disruptions. So when I say that you are in great company this afternoon, you really are in great company. It's 45 minutes with global thought leaders. It's highly impactful. And more than anything else, it's interactive. We want to know what you have to say. So if you've got a question or if you've got a comment for our guest this afternoon, please just put it onto the chat box. We'll be able then to field some of those questions. Let's keep it as interactive as possible. That is how we get the most out of these conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates joining us, allow me to introduce to you our speaker for this afternoon. We're joined by Zanele Njapha, or formerly known as the UnLearning Lady. Cannot wait for us to get into exactly the meaning of the UnLearning Lady, the world's leading voice really on using key unlearning principles to support companies such as Visa, Philip Morris, Deloitte, Discovery, Volkswagen step confidently into new ways of seeing, doing, and even being. She is an award-winning speaker as well as a Forbes contributor. We're looking forward to having this conversation with her, and please help me welcome Zanele Njapha into this conversation. Zanele, it's such a pleasure to have you. A very good afternoon. And I know that I'm sure you're in a summary place, so it looks like as though you are both at home. So I'm really looking forward to us engaging this afternoon. Just talk to us a little bit about you and just tell us a little bit of a background about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Faith. I'm so excited to be here, to be having this conversation with you, but everyone else who's taken the time to join us as a part of the conversation on learning, unlearning, and relearning, and turning that into a culture. So very briefly, I'm a little bit weird. I consider myself an introvert. So I always prefer for the conversation to be outside of myself, but I'm happy to just give you a bit of a snapshot. So I started off my professional journey actually as a primary school teacher. And most might say it's an absolute nightmare, but I completely enjoyed it. It was really the best years of my life. And I was one of those people growing up who always knew that that's where I wanted to be. So I spent a good few years, about 3 years, primary school teaching, and I spent a lot of time in grade 4, grade 5. I also did a bit of grade 7 as well, teaching a range of different subjects and enjoying just being able to understand how human beings learn, how human beings evolved, but also understanding, seeing the world through the eyes of a child. And that really informed so much of what I do today, but also that big transition from that work into the work I do now was heavily influenced by that. So that's me in a nutshell, really obsessed with today's topic. It's not just, I like to say to people, unlearning and change is not just something that I do for work. It's actually a deep obsession of mine. I'm going to admit this, but I've actually got, you'll see 2 little butterflies in my background here, and I've even got a butterfly on my wrist, because that's how deep my obsession with transformation goes. I always think about the life cycle of a butterfly and how a butterfly goes literally from being in one form to transforming into something completely different. And it's that process that we all go through on a consistent basis. So really excited for this conversation.
Well, we're definitely excited to have you this afternoon, but just talk to us a little bit. I mean, you've already started it regarding unlearning. I mean, you are dubbed as the UnLearning Lady. I think it's a wonderful title to have, the UnLearning Lady, but just talk to us a little bit and just expound further in terms of the UnLearning Lady and the meaning and perhaps really the thinking process behind the concept of unlearning.
Absolutely, no problem. I'd love to do that. So this idea of being the unlearning lady really evolved from my clients. I used to position myself right at the beginning of this work as an unlearning expert. I now like to move away from the word expert because it does create some kind of an expectation that you are an individual who maybe knows all rather than a contributor to a bigger conversation. But that's just a me thing. Initially, I had that positioning of being the unlearning expert because that was really where a bunch of my research and my thinking was at the time, but also how I used to support my clients. So before Faith, I used to wear this big wig, huge, beautiful Afro wig, and I don't wear it anymore. So during that transition, my clients would go, we want that lady, the unlearning lady with the big hair. But the unlearning lady had changed her big hair. So now she had the small hair. And so that literally was where that unlearning lady term came in, to say, okay, so this term is sticking, and it's something that when my clients engage with me or think about me, that they're starting to think about. So that's sort of the little back end story around how the unlearning lady term came about. But to go into this idea of what unlearning means, there's so many ways to define it, but I'd like to just engage everyone who's joining us online with the question that will really help us understand what unlearning is, but also what it isn't. So I'd like you to go into the chat and let me know if when you learned how to drive, did you say to yourself, this is now assuming that you've learned how to drive, but when you learned how to drive, did you say to yourself, I need to unlearn not being able to drive? Or did you say to yourself, I need to or would like to learn how to drive? And just let me know really quickly in the chat. And as you fill those in, I want to really go into this big idea that oftentimes what we do is we will focus on the things we need to stop doing. I need to stop this habit that I've got, or this way of thinking, or this way of doing. But instead, we fail to understand that the process of learning, unlearning, and relearning is really just one thing that happens all together. But it's all about where our focus is. So let me just take a step back then from that. So the process of unlearning can be thought of as this process of peeling away layers or emptying a cup. Those are usually really great analogies to think about in the process of acquiring more. Think about a cup that's full, and how when your cup is full, you can't put anything else into that cup. And this process of unlearning then is where we say, what do we then need to let go of? What needs to be challenged? What assumptions need to be taken out with the trash? And I don't like to use the word forgetting here, because it's not necessarily forgetting. When we think about habit creation, we also know that habits don't necessarily die. As long as there's a trigger and an environment for that habit, it might come back to get you. So you want to think about unlearning as this constant process of letting go and grabbing hold, letting go of things that no longer serve us, and then grabbing hold of something new, something exciting, but also something that serves the purpose of that moment.
You know, as you are speaking, I'm actually writing, so don't mind me. I'm learning while we're going through this process. And I'm sure many of us are definitely learning. But just to delve a little bit deeper into it, you know, you're speaking about how, and I'm seeing some of the chat saying, I'm learning and I'm acquiring a new skill. But in that emptying of the cup, and I want to go deeper with the emptying of the cup notion. When we are born, I think from our formative years, 0 to 7, that's a lot of the time where we see our cognitive placement actually happen, right? Our cognitive placement. So the fears get instilled during that time, the rules, the norms of how we should behave as children into adulthood really get cemented during 0 to 7. And from 7, we start having to adapt to this normal way of thinking and this normal way of life, or societal norms and constructs, as it were. And then we get to adulthood. Zanele, they tell us that some of the stuff that we've learned is incorrect. It's wrong. But some of the stuff that we've learned and the thinking processes and the cognitive processing that we've learned from 0 to 7. So we have hardwired. In that instance, you know, how do we even begin to, because before you can unlearn, you have to confront that you need to unlearn. How then do we start bringing ourselves, and how do you know that I need to unlearn? Because I think a lot of us are happy going along our merrily ways completely in our subconscious level. But how do we get to a point of knowing that, hang on a second, I may have been doing things a little bit weird. Let me go back and unlearn. What is our awakening moment?
Sure, I love that question. So powerful. So I want to go back to one of the last things that I said when answering the final question, is understanding that the process of unlearning applies when we think about serving a particular purpose in that moment, which is why I love the idea of learning on the go, because learning on the go means understanding that at any given time, we are consistently shifting. So the world around us is changing. The requirements of our work are constantly changing. And so when you apply the concept of unlearning and relearning, you are saying, what is the purpose that needs to be served in this moment? Who do I need to be in terms of the skills, the expertise that I should convey right now? And so as a result, what then needs to be unlearned and then relearned in this moment? One of the things that come to mind as I think about this, and most people will know, is that we live in a world currently that shames us for changing. people often say, you know what, Zanele, when I go to my group of friends or maybe to my colleagues and I show them that I've changed, I'm a different person. Maybe before I used to really love cats, to give a random example, but now I'm just not quite about the cat life. Most people will even frown and shame you for that. And so we haven't quite created environments and cultures where it's okay for people to change their minds. And funny enough, this is actually our vision as an organization at the Unlearners, is to create a world where people are okay with the fact that we're always changing. So then let's dig deeper then into your question that you were asking just now about how do I know then? How you would know is you would look at your context right now. So I want you to call into mind whether it's your portfolio, whether it is your function at work, where you are currently at the moment, whether you're a leader, wherever you are in your organization, and think about if there are any gaps. These can be gaps in terms of what's required from you or what you have the capacity to give. So think about some of those gaps and don't think about them in a way that faults you or makes you feel bad or sound like you are incompetent, but just bring them to mind. And then I want you to think about how those particular gaps will always need for any types of behaviors, mindsets, but also actions to be let go of. So I'll give you a quick example. At the moment, one of the things that I struggled with quite a lot, Faith, in my entrepreneurship journey as someone who is a confessed perfectionist that's definitely working on it, is I started off thinking I could do all the things. And as my business scaled and as my business grew, it's fine. I can still be this person and that person and this person and still have an opportunity to have quality sleep every night. But that was something that I realized because I was seeing these gaps in my team, in my organization, that were gaps in maybe how quickly we were able to respond to our clients, gaps in terms of the customer experience and how well that was going. I started to understand that this gap means I need to let go of a mindset. I need to let go of a habit, of a behavior. And then I took stock of what that might be. But then I also understood that there's a new behavior that needs to replace this. And this for me is the powerful part that I often teach. When you're on an unlearning journey, you really want to think about three key things. You want to think about and be very clear about the thing you need to let go of. So in this particular circumstance, what are the skills? What are the mindsets? What are the things that I'm doing habitually that probably need to go? Make a nice little list of them. Don't judge them. Don't put any labels on them about whether they make you a bad person or a horrible leader. None of that. Just make a list, be open to it. And then the second thing you want to jump to, and this is going right back to that car thing we spoke about earlier on with the driving. Think about what behavior, mindset, or habit you then need to build after that. So in essence, what I'm saying is, what is the mindset on the other side of the thing you want to let go of? Because our brains work on a, if you don't use it, you lose it theme. You want to think about it like that. So if you don't use a mindset, a neural pathway, a behavior long enough, that pathway within your brain actually starts to prune, and the new ones that you form become dominant and then become defaults. So I'll give you a really quick example just on myself, making myself sound like a horrible leader at the moment, but just thinking about myself and the example that I've just given you. If I say to myself, okay, I really need to let go of this mindset that I can do all things in my business or in my organization, the behavior or the mindset on the other side of that would be, I'm really great at what I do, but other people are also really great at what they are doing or what they do. And it's okay for me to be supported. But it might even be that it's okay to understand that everyone stands in their strength and there's power in that. So find the mindset and the behavior that's on the other side of what you want to unlearn. So then you shift your focus to what you want to build. And then the last step, and I'm happy to go back into these, Faith, just to maybe get a little bit deeper into them. But then the last step, once you understand what you need to let go of, you know what then needs to replace it in your brain, where the focus needs to be. The last thing you want to do is you want to get really good at building habits. So what are the things you can do to take the thing you want to learn and turn it into a habit? So for example, you might use a tool like the habit loop that says you need to have a cue for each and every habit. So something to remind yourself every now and again. I used to tie a little blue ribbon onto pens, onto all sorts of things around the house. I was starting to look a little bit a little bit creepy to everyone else. But this was my cue to remind myself every now and again, wherever I am in my space, that I've made this commitment, or I need to remember to buy bread, or whatever it was in that week. So you want to have some kind of a cue so that this new behavior you're trying to build is consistent. And then over time, the thing you want to unlearn starts to prune, because you're not focusing on it, but you're focusing on building the behavior you want.
I love how you were speaking about organizational culture and the journey of entrepreneurs, because a lot of the more established, maybe more the bigger, the larger maximum kind of corporations, there's often a mantra that says that the wheel turns, but it turns slow, simply because it's a larger ship that you have to contend with. And then there's this notion of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. How then do you reconcile the notion of don't fix it if it's not broke, and versus I actually can do something different? Because a lot of traditional, more established organizations really do believe if it's not broken, if it's still working, if it's still making a profit, don't touch it. It's fine. But then I think there's a deep voice that is inside of us, especially as leaders, that says, hang on a second, it can be better. It can be different. Maybe change is needed. So help us reconcile the two kind of, almost cognitive dissonance that people go through of, I don't want to fix yet lest I taint it, but I know that there's something more better or different on the other side.
Yeah, that's really, really exciting for me, because what it takes us right back to is our understanding of some of the language that we use. And I love that you use the word broken, because, and I often say this to people, is we could all be looking at the exact same thing. And I use a lot of all of these images in my presentations that help have people going, oh my goodness, am I seeing a duck? Am I seeing this? Am I seeing that? But they help us to understand that at any given moment with the unlearning process, one of the primary things you want to understand is that we could all be looking at the exact same thing, but be interpreting it differently. And this is why it's important to start here, Faith, to start with the understanding that there's the truth, and then there's the story about the truth. Most of us will act on the story about the truth. So if I'll give you a really quick example, I'm wearing, like you said, right at the beginning when you introduced me, I'm wearing this waistcoat, and I'm wearing nothing else, maybe on my shoulders or on my arms. And so this is the truth. The truth is that I'm wearing a waistcoat. The story is that I must be in a really warm area. That's the story. It's the story because it's not confirmed, and it's an assumption or a presupposition that your brain has made, which is perfectly fine, because human beings cannot know everything. And so our brains create these beautiful shortcuts like algorithms that help us to understand and interpret our environment. The trouble then comes in when we take that assumption and we apply confirmation bias, or false consensus bias, excuse me. False consensus bias is when I say my perspective of the world surely is what everyone else is seeing. So Zanele, surely you must be there. Guys, doesn't Zanele look like she's, really, really warm? And everyone goes, oh yeah, sure. But we've made that assumption. I usually like to use the absolutely weird, and pardon me here, guys, weird example. If you think about when you are in the bathroom and you just want to draw a little bit of tissue, maybe blow your nose, some of us will say we prefer the tissue to be flap over, but some of us will insist that it needs to be flap under. But can I tell you that most people, when they go into a situation like that, and they might see, for example, that the flap is over, they will lose their minds, because in their heads and in their brains, they are saying, who in the world would do something like this? But the only reason why that's happening is because human beings at any given time are applying this false consensus bias, where we're saying, my view of the world surely at this moment is everyone else's. So that's where I want to start. When we think about this word broken, it's important that we manage each other's expectations. So let's start there. What does broken mean for us? Does broken mean that it's not getting us the results that we want at this time in the organization? Or does broken mean that it could be better, like you so beautifully said, Faith? And I would say we start with redefining what we actually mean, because language is a very big part of learning that we must always be cognizant of. So let's start with identifying, okay, broken could mean for us that it's not serving the purpose at all, like it's really, really bad. But broken could also mean that it's not the best that we can do with what we have right now. And maybe even attaching some kind of figure to it. So maybe if a system is broken or if a way of working is broken, it means that it's not allowing us to maybe increase our sales by 60%, which is our target. Then we know it's definitely broken. But there's shared consensus and shared language amongst the group. I think that for me is a very big part of unlearning, because when we engage in that process of unlearning, we start with understanding what's the assumption that's in the room. I don't even like to call it an elephant, because I feel like it's smaller than that. It's like a mouse. What's the mouse in the room that nobody is speaking about, but are assumptions that are actually consistently defining how we see things? And once we're very clear on that, then we start to make sure that each and every person in the room understands exactly what it is. And then we build that culture. And you alluded to this a little bit. So the first thing would be awareness of those assumptions. The second thing would be creating a culture of experimentation. How do we create a culture where, whether it's either in a hub within our organization that's made up of different members of our team, where we're always blowing things up, trying things, experimenting, breaking this, breaking that, so that we're always sharing this iterative evidence within our team. So that's the second part. Create a culture of experimentation where people can try things. One of my clients has a concept that they call the door swinging both ways. And it aims to give people a sense of autonomy behind experimentation. To say that if you find you've made a call on a decision or you've signed off on something, always ask yourself, does this door swing both ways? Can I come back from this decision? If I can't and the door only swings only that way, don't make that call. Speak to someone who might be your senior just to confirm it. So helping everyone to understand that we can experiment and it's okay to get things wrong and make mistakes. Then the very last part, which is probably my personal favorite, is holding space for other people. An example I like to give around this is, imagine sitting in a restaurant and Faith, maybe you and I are meeting for coffee and you've said, I'm coming, Zanele, I promise I'll be there. I get to the restaurant, maybe I'm a little bit early, but then it's now 5 minutes after time, Faith, and you're still not there. And I'm going, people are starting to come to me and ask me, is the seat taken? Can I sit here? You're going, no. Someone's coming. They're with me. And now the restaurant is filling up and this person is still not here. Faith, you're still not there. Not that this is a thing of yours, Faith. Oh my goodness, this is not me saying that. But maybe you're still not there and I'm starting to panic. Holding space means understanding that you won't always know what the other person is going through. You won't always see things from their perspective. But to hold space for them within the unlearning and relearning process means that they are going through exactly what you are going through. There's a part of them that's letting go of a perspective, but there's also a part of them that's grabbing hold of something new.
I want to expound in just a moment about the type of leadership that we do need in this new world of work. However, you've labored on something so profound about holding the space and about how we need to let go. You've said it more than once, let go. A lot of leaders struggle with control. And struggle could be, it could be a good thing, control, to want to always have oversight in terms of what to do. I'm guilty of it. I love knowing that I've got some element of control. But there are those of us that take control to a very new level. You are very pedantic about what you have control over. And the process of unlearning requires a certain amount of loss of control, because you do not have the ability to see, let's say, 2 or 3 steps, because you're still unlearning a lot of the hardwiring. For those of us that are leading organizations and massive organizations where we've got, let's say, hundreds or even thousands of people depending on us being consistent, because that's another thing about leadership, it's consistency. How then do we start introducing the notion of letting go of that control and stepping into the unknown to try to unlearn some of the hardwiring we've been brought up with?
Yeah, what a challenging thing to do, because the brain is literally consistently always looking for threats. Whatever we're doing, the brain is just trying to scout the environment for threats. That's why if there's a loud bang, maybe while we're having this conversation, we'll get a bit of a fright and we might even look in that direction, because the brain is going, am I going to die? Should I run? Should I stop? Should I switch this off? There's that constant ongoing sense of just anxiety that's not necessarily healthy at all as well. So I would say you really want to go right back to where we started with those 3 parts. And they definitely do look different for this conversation and for leaders as well who are in this environment. because there's definitely, Faith, and I love it that you said this so beautifully, there's a definite halo effect when it comes to leadership. There is, what I found with my clients is that there's this idea that because you're the leader, because you're the CFO, because you are managing director, whatever role you play, surely you are not going through the change the way I am. Surely you are not having to let go of a part of your identity and grab hold of something new as this company reorganizes or restructures. Surely you're not going through this as well. So there is that halo effect. And I often like to advise that leaders help somehow to break this down, because when you break this down, you contribute to a sense of psychological safety in your team. You become more human to everyone else, because they then understand that Faith, just like myself, or that Renelle or that Robin, just like me, is having to let go of something through this process, but also is having to grab hold. Then they relate to you differently, and even the language that you speak to each other can become shared language. So that's, I think, just a little bit of background that I wanted to make sure that we use as a kind of foundation. Now, to go into those 3 key steps, which is the very first one is starting off with understanding what the presuppositions, the assumptions, but maybe even the fears are. When you think about some of us who tend to want that level of control, I won't even dub it micromanagement, because that term does have a very bad rep, but yes, it definitely is very negative in certain senses. But you want to understand, what is it? So I like to say that if a leader doesn't have a coach, like, hello, what are you waiting for? Because this coaching is not necessarily someone who's going to coach you to be a better leader, but because they coach you as an individual, you will find yourself becoming a better leader as a result of that. So the first part, understanding what assumptions are behind that mindset of, I need to always just know what's happening in the business. What is she working on today? What's this person doing? What are the assumptions that you have behind that? What are some of the deeper seated fears that you have? And most of us will name a primary emotion. So something, for example, like, I want to stay on top of everything. I just like to be in control and to have some kind of an idea. But what we find is often the secondary emotion is fear. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that if I don't know what they're doing, this business won't exist, or things are going to go wrong. So just checking in, the first part, being aware of assumptions, check in. Yes, you might know what the primary emotion is behind it, but understand what's underneath that, what's really influencing it, and work on the process of healing that for yourself before you start to think about, okay, what's the behavioral mindset that I need to learn? So that's the first part. Do some of that work, engage with a coach, engage with someone who can really help you to unlock some of that key and deep thinking. Like you said, Faith, it might even be rooted in our childhood sometimes. Maybe something happened when you were a lot younger and you felt like, oh, if I'd just been there to see what that person was doing, or if I'd just been there the moment that they closed the door, things would have been okay. And because there was a lot of emotion there, the brain will carry that and turn it into a constant spiral or behavior due to that trauma. So then the second part is, what do I want to build? Ask yourself, if that's the behavior that I want to stop executing or practicing, what's the new behavior? What does the kind of leadership I want to practice actually practically look like? Do I want to just check in on my team once a day? Do I want to have a practical project management or task management tool like an Asana, or a Trello, or whatever it is you prefer to use? And just check in on that. And then only when we have our team meetings on Mondays, then I hear from everyone. Really define exactly what it looks like, because step number 3 is then building the habit around it. Unless it becomes a habit, you're going to go right back here to making assumptions and living in that noise and living in that space where you just don't quite know, you're fearful, you're feeling a lot of shame and blame around your team and yourself. So once you know what that behavior looks like, you've practically defined exactly what that kind of leadership looks like, you want to detach or let go of focusing on what you want to stop doing. So don't say to yourself, oh, I need to stop micromanaging. Oh, I need to stop. I'll show you how effective that is. I want to invite everyone 2 seconds to do something for me. Don't think about a purple elephant for just 2 seconds. Don't think about the purple elephant at all. Don't think about how big and purple and shiny it is. Don't think about its cute purple tail and its big purple ears that are flapping in the wind. Now go into the chat and let me know what you thought of that entire time. Exactly.
Terrible. I'm
For
already
yourself.
seeing it. I thought of a big, shiny purple elephant with a cute nose and big ears.
Exactly. Because when you focus on what you don't want to build, the brain doesn't see it that way. And so you find yourself right back at the thing that you don't want to do. And this is often where we make the mistake when we think about unlearning is we go, okay, Zanele spoke about unlearning. So I need to focus on the thing I want to stop being a micromanager, stop. And every morning when you say your affirmations, you are not a micromanager. You are not a micromanager. You focus on what you want to build and then make a habit out of those things. And what you'll find over time is that what you don't want to do will prune because you fed those new neural pathways. So I think that framework is always a really helpful one to apply, Faith, as people think about unlearning, whatever the context might be, especially when it comes to leadership and those behaviors.
This is some good stuff that we're learning this afternoon. So I must say that thank you so much. And if you would like to consistently, I'm seeing the chats that are happening. If you've got a question as well for Zanele, won't you just send it through to us via the chat bot, and then we're able to read out some of those questions. I do have a comment here. I think is it from David Weidman saying that saying that we need a culture of asking to confirm understanding or perception. For example, I am colorblind. Strangely, it helped me to ask and not assume. Love that part. We need a culture of asking to confirm, understanding, or perception.
Yes, I love that. But also what that does, and that's such a powerful observation, it also helps us to manage expectations. In a world where we're always having to let go and grab hold and let go and grab hold, managing expectations is right up there in terms of things we can do to not only serve ourselves, but also to support other people. Every now and again, go on and check, or maybe define what your expectation is when it comes to certain projects or anything, even in the personal environment, Faith. I find that this is a really helpful tool to say, okay, it's Monday morning or October is about to start, family. On this day and this day and this day, mommy has to work. So mommy won't be available. She won't be home during those days. But on this day and this day, I will be home and I'll be able to play with you and do whatever and whatever. Then you find that everyone else knows how to work with you. And you don't end up feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm such a disappointment. I'm not showing up for my team. I'm not showing up for my family. But when I've defined those expectations and I've invited everyone else to do the same, there's less ambiguity and the brain is feeling less threatened that entire time.
What type of leader do you think we need in this new world of work? Because I tell you one thing, things have changed and things have forced us to change. You know, I often make reference to COVID because the last time we had something of this magnitude, which affected the global community, was in the 1900s or early 1900s. And now we had to face it about 3 years ago, and it changed the way we perceived each other, changed the way we looked at each other, but it also changed the way that we relate as leaders. So what kind of leadership intentionality do we need to make us sustainable, successful leaders of the future and of the now?
Sure. The one thing I would say probably is the most important for me, possibly because of the work that I do, I would say we need more leaders who are not afraid of change. I would go even further to say that we need leaders who, and I mean this in the organizational context, I'll explain myself, but we need leaders who are not afraid of death. And the reason why I say that is because whenever change happens, I like to say we need to play the role of the midwife, so bringing in the new thing that's coming. But we also need to play the role of what's called a death doula, or the hospice assistant who holds your hand when you pass away. We need someone who can play the role of saying it's okay that something needs to die in our team right now, or this way of working, or this leader has left. It's okay. It's fine. So we often play that role of the midwife and we're excited about what's new. Let's do the new thing. But we don't play both of those roles. So we need leaders who are not afraid of change.
And I love that. Leaders that are not afraid of death. And just to expound a little bit about it as well, because the leader needs to have foresight. And we need to be able to implement that foresight, not just as a conceptual sort of abstract term, but really as something that we implement every single day. How then do we implement that foresight, keeping in mind that a lot of times we are engaging with new stimulus, trying to unlearn what no longer serves us, and I love what you said, what no longer serves us, and in that, try to just stay afloat. Many businesses are just trying to stay afloat. So just talk to us a little bit about the element of foresight and how we can be practical in implementing foresight.
Sure. I love that question. I'll say that there are two key things that come to mind for me. The first one is focusing on working on the self, because like you said so beautifully, everything around us is changing. I mean, you could go asleep with a business today and you wake up tomorrow morning and something has happened on the JSE that completely changes your business. And everything is completely different. You wake up, there's a pandemic. You wake up and the president is delivered this speech and now your business is different. So there's so many different factors that are at play. And I'll never forget a mentor of mine actually said, you know what, Zanele, the work that we do as futurists is not necessarily about changing the outside stimulus. But the work that we do is about helping people to be better prepared, that when they get to the future, whatever is there, it doesn't surprise them. And I thought that that was so brilliant. For me, that's literally one of the best things we can do for ourselves, is not necessarily to focus all of our energy. Yes, looking into the future is fantastic, but really understanding how we can work internally on us, because the future is uncertain and always changing. When you can work on building up those skills, meta skills like learning, unlearning, and relearning, and the capacity to think differently, then you make sure that whatever is around the corner, you are constantly showing up for it. The one other thing that I will say that probably feeds better into your question than that is something that a colleague of mine, Graham Codrington, actually shared not too long ago with me. And he shared this idea of taking about 5 minutes during, let's say, for example, every Monday or every Tuesday, you have a team call. That's just a check-in, sort of like a status meeting. You take about 5 minutes at the beginning of that meeting, as consistently as you can as a team, to share a wild, out of this world idea, just very randomly, untainted, untouched, without any kind of constraints about, oh, we don't have the budget, or, oh, this will never work in our industry, oh, we've seen those people do it and it didn't work. None of that. Just each person, maybe you do on a rotational basis, and someone shares a wild idea of something we could try in the next 10, 5, 2 years as a company that would completely blow us out of the water. And just by consistently sharing those ideas, what our brain starts to do is it opens us up to possibility. Then our reticular activating system, which is the part of our brains that helps us to focus in on an intention we have, starts to draw those opportunities, starts to invite those people who make those types of things possible. Then the future starts to scare us a little bit less. So make foresighting a habit, which is, I think, in essence what I'm saying. Find a space in your day, in your team's day, on a consistent, maybe week, every 2 weeks, where foresighting becomes a practice. Because unless it's a habit, then it's not actually going to influence business metrics or even business practice in the long run.
Now, the concept also of unlearning speaks significantly to the embracing of a new generation and intergenerational and collaboration and intergenerational thinking. Now, I have got younger siblings, never mind from my business space, but even at home I face this, where and I think many of us can relate to this. You are so uncool. How do you say something like that? We no longer say this. We no longer use this term. Who dresses like this? Who speaks like this? I think all of us have come to a space, and we are really at that age now where we've got a generation that truly believes we are the most uncool people to ever exist, including in our organizations. The boss is not cool because the boss is so old school and old fashioned. How then, and a lot of times when it comes to leadership, we often struggle to come to the level of the younger generation so that we can learn new stimulus. Because ultimately, I view the generation that is younger as the leaders of the future. And you can't build businesses of the future where these leaders of the future are going to take over if you don't from time to time interact with them and even learn from them. Now, there are two ways we can approach it. Sometimes we view this younger, hipper generation as almost threats, because they're more verbose, they're more entitled, they want. But just talk to us a little bit about how we can learn from this younger generation and embrace intergenerational collaboration so that indeed we may reach our destination of success much quicker than if we were to be the uncool person in the room.
Oh, which is no one wants to be that person, right? But I think at some stage we all find ourselves being that person. And I'll never forget, Faith, similar to your story, during my teaching days, I had students that would sometimes stay over in my class and we would do some extra lessons and then I would walk them out to the gate. And one day I'll never forget, I was still at the time the young, I'm going to use the word hip, but probably that gives me away as well, that I'm actually not as young as I think. But at the time I was young and woke. So I definitely had that relationship that other teachers didn't have with the students. And I'll never forget one day, one of them brought their phone and they said, Miss Njapha, there's this new song that's just come out with a dance on TikTok. Do you know the song? Do you know the song? And I'll never forget, I said, okay, yes, probably there's a good chance. I'm young. I like to think I know these things. They leaned the phone closer to my ear. And it hit me that I didn't actually know the song. So I said, no, I don't know the song. And they thought, oh, Miss Njapha, you're actually old. Oh, Miss Njapha's old. And they agreed amongst each other and they just kept walking. And oh my goodness, stabbed to the heart. But I think that it was at that moment that I realized, oh my goodness, at any given moment, no matter even how old you are or how mature you are, you will always be on the other end. And that for me is really the reframing that needs to happen in every organization that I've stepped into, is understanding that no matter where you are in an organization, you are in a position of power of some sort. And when I say power, I mean you have the capacity or the opportunity to teach, but also you have the power and the capacity to learn as well. So whether it is our Gen Zs that have come in and disrupt, or even our millennials who, when we came into organizations, we were told we were unruly. So wherever it is that you stand, you have the capacity to learn, but also to teach. And that understanding needs to be the basis of how we build our team cultures. So very much to your question, when we sit in our conversation, everyone is seen as someone who has something to contribute to the future, because we cannot only lead into our future with just the youth who doesn't have the wisdom of what the past has brought, doesn't have the scars to show for it. Yes, they've got that agility and that excitement and some of those newer ideas that may be a little bit more fresh. So understanding, how do we have each and every person in the room, in the organization, both learn and teach, so that we're all in a position of power, but we've also broken down some of that hierarchical structure that tends to maybe even put young people in the forefront. So something like a reverse mentorship, I found often works really well, to say, how do the youth teach and learn, and how do some of us who have been around for a little bit longer also teach and learn?
Who would have thought? We've reached almost the end of our conversation, and I feel like I could do this again for another 2 hours. It's absolutely sad. But as we wrap up the conversation as well, Zanele, and I love what you said. I'm going to go back to what you said at the beginning about how there is no shame in change. And I really want to hone in on that, because sometimes I think as leaders, we attach a lot of shame and guilt to the want or to the need to change. As we wrap up, how do you advise us to implement some of the learnings we've got today so that we do not feel ashamed to change our minds, so that we do not feel shame in saying, this no longer serves me? And this is true both in our organizations as leaders, but it's also true also in our personal lives. How do we implement the notion of let go of what no longer serves you and don't feel ashamed to change?
Yes. Beautiful. I love it. Great note to end off on. So I would say it all starts with conversations and building those relationships. The more people see something being praised, rewarded, and practiced, the more they understand that, oh, this is how we do things here. And often when you say, no, it's okay to change, guys, it's fine to make mistakes, and people don't do it, it's because the culture says something different. And so you want to start building that culture by having conversations. I often say, when it is your weekly meeting or your monthly conversation as a team, or even your yearly team conference, understanding what each and every person in your team is unlearning, what they are relearning, and maybe with unlearning, what are some of the mistakes that they've made? What are the things that they've blown up this week? What are the huge blunders that they've made that could possibly be a bit dangerous, but they've tried them, they've experimented, they've put themselves out there. What did they learn from it? How did they evolve in that process? And the more we have and this, Faith, will literally be the only thing that I share, is because the more we have those conversations and we have them consistently, then the rewiring in people's brains that, oh, every now and again, we keep getting rewarded for just making more mistakes and learning from them. This must be a really good thing, because the only reason why people think it's not a good thing is because it's been practiced that way. So if we can just start practicing it in little ways, rewarding it, finding ways to give your team little rewards every now and again when they try something, and even if it doesn't work, well done because you tried. It didn't work, but what did you learn? Rewarding that behavior and then doing it consistently. Rewards stimulate emotion, and that consistency are two of the building blocks of creating really solid habits. So I would challenge everyone to do those two key things in the next few months, and let me know how it goes.
Well, UnLearning Lady with the short hair, we really appreciate everything that you've shared and your insights that you've given us for this particular series. I think that we've all learned something today. I think you've also given us an opportunity to forgive ourselves and to be more human in the way that we lead. Because sometimes when you are a leader, there's this assumption that you alluded to that we lose the humanity from which we function and the depth from which we function. So thank you for giving us the permission and the space to just confront this conversation as humans so that we can begin unlearning and we can begin learning without feeling guilty nor feeling shame in the unlearning and learning process. So
the unlearners. Learn, change. Learn,